Congressman Doug Collins, ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman, good morning, and thank you for joining us on America's Newsroom. So,
it's good to be with you.
Cicilline telling Bill over the weekend, Fox News Sunday, we are going to follow the facts where they take us. So he makes the case that they can investigate and legislate. They can and they will. So what does this tell you about the direction Democrats are going?
It really just reminds me of the self-help sort of thought that if you keep telling yourself something enough, if I keep telling myself something enough, it'll actually happen. The reality here is last week we took rules that were already in place, we packaged them up, we made it look different, we wanted people to think something's going on. But the reality is they're not legislating, and what they do legislate on is very partisan things that will never, be able to pass some of it even the floor of the House, but some of it actually into the Senate. What's concerning to me is what we're not doing. If they really wanted to legislate, what about immigration? What about a problem on our border? Instead of talking about the problem, let's fix it. Last week in the resolution, they talked about foreign interference in our elections, but yet they will not take up any of our bills to actually deal with foreign interference. So I think it just goes back to the point they really, really wish they could, but they can't, so they just have to keep telling themselves they're doing something they're not.
Well, in that same interview, he made the case that they are legislating. He said, quote, we've passed over 250 pieces of legislation, and 80% of those bills are sitting on Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's desk. So he says they're legislating. Republicans are stopping anything from getting done.
Well, it's really interesting when you look at actual legislation, something that I've actually done. If you want to go back and see how bipartisan legislation is done, you go back and look at the First Step Act, which Hakeem Jeffries and I worked on, Music Modernization Act, again, which took over. These bills took 5 and 6 years, Cloud Act. Those were things that found broad bipartisan support, and that's the only way you move legislation in D.C. is when you have support. When you simply put out talking points and make them into bills and give them over to the Senate, which is controlled by Republicans, and by the way, a Republican president, those are the kind of things that don't move. So I think when we look at this from a bigger perspective, we can pass a lot of different bills, but the things that most people are worried about, jobs, economy, immigration, those kind of things, we're not passing those. We're simply going down this yellow brick road of impeachment in a different form to where they can satisfy a base who just really don't like this president. Let's play it plain and simple. Mr. Cicilline does not like this president. They want to make it clear. But what was really interesting in his comments yesterday, I never heard anything more about the Mueller report or the Russia investigation or the conclude. They've just sort of left that because it didn't fit their narrative. Now it's just throw we can on the wall and see what sticks.
Well, that is what the president had to say this morning. Just a short time ago, he tweeted this: House Judiciary has given up on the Mueller report. Sadly for them, after 2 years and $40 million spent, zero collusion, zero obstruction. So they say, okay, let's look at everything else and all of the deals that Trump has done over his lifetime. That was the president this morning. Meanwhile, I want to ask you about the Inspector General and this look into FISA abuses. What can you tell us is the latest on this as it now goes to AG Bill Barr?
Well, it's at the point now to where it's beginning to get the final stages, so we'll actually see it. The classification part of this now will happen. This is something that this report should concern every American. We've already seen the just damning report that's been listed for Mr. Comey, talking about his lies and his leaks, and I think that's something that's already came out. Now we're getting ready to go to the very heart of this issue, going all the way back, because I don't think anybody's ever been held accountable for the leaking with Carter Page. When we go back to an American citizen who the FISA court used in this process, that should concern both Republicans and Democrats or independents. If you don't even care about politics, you ought to be concerned about a court that can meet as this one does and actually attack American citizens' interests without really any oversight. This is something that I wish my chairman would take more seriously. For the last 2 years, he's basically ignored it while we were in the majority. He didn't want to participate in how the corrupt cabal actually started a lot of this stuff with Strzok, Comey, McCabe, Page. Now we're seeing those move forward. This is something that's very important going ahead that we need to actually focus on.
I know that you're calling for a hearing with Horowitz, and your colleague Jim Jordan is coming up on this program later this hour. He says that a hearing will happen at the appropriate time. What can you tell us about that actually happening?
Well, I'm not sure what the appropriate time means for my chairman, because all he seems to want to schedule is things that are just random, rabbit hunts that are going nowhere. An appropriate time would be as soon as this report is public that we actually go ahead and get this on the schedule. For him to not even thought about it, for him to not even say, we're planning this, or as soon as we get the report turn to me and say, ranking member, this is when we're going to do this, is really disturbing, because when we bring it up, and I've actually heard sort of his comments, it's almost like he doesn't want to deal with it. He doesn't want to deal with the fact that there was a concerted attack on this president by high-ranking members of the Department of Justice and the FBI, and we're beginning to see that start to unravel. And he doesn't want to admit that for 2 years they put their head in the sand and didn't want to talk about it while we were investigating it, and now for the last 8 months have chased rabbits after this president because they had the chance to.
Well, the big question will be obviously how much of that we get to see after the classification process is complete. Finally, I want to ask you about this bipartisan call by lawmakers to see emails of top executives at some of our largest technology companies, including Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. What exactly is it that you want to know from their emails and other documents that lawmakers are requesting?
Well, I think what we're looking at here is for the first time we're having an honest look that is what is these big tech companies and the size and how they compete in the marketplace. And do our antitrust laws still apply, or they need to be adjusted? Or they actually, just because they're big doesn't mean they're bad. Doesn't because they're big and because they had great ideas doesn't mean that we need to tear them apart. But we also do not need to let go of our oversight role to say, is there anti-competitive behavior in here? Is there true antitrust issues dealing with privacy, dealing with their competitiveness in the marketplace with ad dollars and other things? So this is, from my perspective, is a request to let's look at this. Let's actually do legislation. Let's actually not come with a preconceived notion of what we want, but let's get information and see if the laws are working.
Well, there's
or
a
can
deadline
work,
of
or can work
October
better.
14th. I have 2 seconds left. You expect them to comply? Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, and others to turn these materials over?
I would hope so, and it's in their best interest to do that.
All right, Congressman, appreciate your time this morning, sir. Thank you.